Welcome everybody as we get ourselves live on Facebook. I just want to welcome you to one of our 90 days events. We'll be starting shortly here. Looks like we are live. Excellent. Here we go. So tonight, thank you for joining us. We will be having a special guest this evening with Simon Brooking from Bowmore. And as always, we have our standing special guest with Mark Roy from New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlets. Mark is our spirits specialist, so everything in the store is his responsibility in terms of what you taste and the flavors that you get to enjoy. If we do have single barrel or special selections, those are also at Mark's doing. So make sure that you check out those tasting notes and try the variety of products, because it is one person that's giving you all the notes. So it's nice if you start to share in the same flavors and same feels. Mark is somebody that is good to follow for that. This evening, we will be meeting with Simon Brooking from Bowmore, and we'll be tasting 3 or 4 of his spirits, along with comments about tastings with oysters and pairings. So that'll be fun. If you're joining us from Eventbrite, then you probably already know that registering with Eventbrite will suggest that you follow us with an app called Scavify. And you can find that at 90daysaroundtheworld.com. If you go to 90daysaroundtheworld.com. And Scavify allows you to collect points and check out our passport program as we venture through these 90 days. So it's kind of fun, it's informative, and you'll win a few more points and get some specials for New Hampshire Liquor and Wine Outlet. At the end of this evening's event, we will also provide you the code word for this night's Scavify scavenger hunt. And in the interim, we will have Simon give us some entertaining information. Simon, are you ready to go?
All set there, Sean.
All right, Simon, take it away.
Thanks so much. And it's westering home with a song in the air, light in the eye, and it's goodbye to care. Laughter and love and a welcoming there. Isle of my heart, my own one. Where are the folks like the folks of the West? David Turner and Eddie McCaffer at Bowmore are the best. There I will hie me and there I will rest, at home with my own folk on Isla. Ladies and gentlemen, holiday cheers, greetings to you all. I'm Simon Brooking, the Beam Suntory Scotch Ambassador. My mission to spread world peace through whiskey, one dram at a time. Welcome to Around the World in 90 Days. I like to sing and I like to drink Scotch, and most folks will say to me they prefer me listening to me drink Scotch. So we've got an evening of a spirited evening. I believe your last stop in your 90 days around the world, you were in Tennessee. Tonight we're taking you across the pond over to Scotland, to the tiny wee island of Islay. 3,200 people, 9 distilleries. It's also called the Happy Island. Please, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the chat, or if you have any questions, you can send them in through the Q&A option as well. I should also mention we are doing a little trivia contest this evening. So keep your pencils sharp, your wits sharp, and who knows, you may come away with a wee prezi from Scotland. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to dive into the wonderful world of whiskey. Let's see here where we go from the beginning. Right. So the #1 vaults. That sounds very mysterious, doesn't it? But it is a very special place for us. We're going to take you to this warehouse on the island of Islay, where Bowmore is located, the distillery. The #1 vaults is the oldest licensed distillery on the island of Islay, the second oldest licensed distillery in Scotland. And it dates back to 1779. And the #1 vaults is the oldest licensed warehouse, Scotch warehouse in the world. What makes it that way? What makes it so unique? We'll talk about that shortly. But here is Bowmore. Bowmore means the big rock, the big bend. It is located on a bend on the loch there. If you look at the various names of the distilleries in Scotland, they'll tell you exactly where the boys had their illegal stills back in the day. Bowmore means the big rock, the big reef. Lefroig means the hollow by the bay. Auchentoshan from the lowlands means the corner of the field. So back when it was illegal, there was no GPS, no Waze, so you had to know where to find these stills. and the name of the whiskey told you where the boys were hiding the stills, where you could pick up your weekly rations. The number one vaults has a key influence on the whiskeys because these vaults are located below sea level, and they're going to impact the whiskeys the way they are aging in these warehouses. The same way in the Kentucky, the heat of the Kentucky summers, that's going to impact the whiskeys differently from the cool, damp climate that you find in Scotland and the cooler, damper climate you're going to find on the island of Islay. So it's a lot of it, the influence is the wood and the water, whether it's the peaty brown water that you find on the island of Islay, or it's the sea itself, which is going to influence the whiskies as they're aging from the island of Islay. And the wood is very key. It really is going to influence. They say 70% of the flavor of single malt Scotch comes from its time in the barrel. Well, what is single malt Scotch? Well, it has to be made where? The product of an individual what? Made exclusively from what? Distilled in what kind of stills? And aged for at least how many years in what kind of casks? And bottled at a minimum of what percentage ABV? And that's alcohol by volume, ABV. So, first one, where does it have to be made? It has to be made in Scotland. Single malt Scotch has to be made in Scotland. We are the only country that names our spirit is named after our country. Think about that. There are no other countries in the world that their spirit is named after the country itself. Scotch has to be made in Scotland. There is blended Scotch, which is a blend of different single malt distilleries plus a neutral grain alcohol. But single malt means it has to be made at one distillery, the product of an individual distillery. So Bulmore only makes Bulmore. Made exclusively from what kind of grain? Malted barley. That's one of the big differences between a single malt Scotch and, say, a bourbon. Bourbon by law is 51% corn. So a single malt is made out of pure malted barley, and that's the only grain to be used. Distilled in copper pot stills. Now, again, using bourbon as the difference, they are going to use stainless steel, and they're going to use column stills, which is a continuous distillation. We make our whiskey one batch at a time. Aged for a minimum of at least 3 years, and in what kind of casks? Oak casks. Oak casks really produce great results for us. Historically, they were using European oak in the 19th century. And then after Prohibition in the United States, they discovered this wealth of American white oak because the bourbon law said you can only use a bourbon barrel once here in America. And we thrifty Scots said, perfect, send them over to us, we can reuse them. So we will use, and 90% of the barrels in Scotland today are used American bourbon barrels. And each of these different types of casks, European Oloroso sherry casks, American bourbon barrels, are going to impart different flavors. From the American bourbon barrels, you're getting vanilla, caramel notes, lactone notes, which give you coconut notes. Aged for at least 3 years in those oak casks and bottled at a minimum of 40% ABV, which is the standard for us. But most of the whiskeys that we'll be tasting this evening are around 43%. And this little nugget for you there, it's worth over $1.3 billion to the US market. So Scotch is good for the economy as well as good for your health. Now, in terms of the origins of Scotch, it is over 800 years old. 1494, we have a document with a friar John Core purchasing 8 bowls of malt to make akavite. Scotch whiskey is an akavite. It is a water of life. And the Gaelic word for that is ushkeveha, ushke meaning water and veha of life. Over the years, it was shortened from ushkeveha just to ushke, and then anglicized, morphed into whiskey, ushke whiskey. So when you're ordering whiskey, you're actually ordering water in the Gaelic language. Now, as the monks spread the religion from Ireland, they traveled, and one of the first countries they came to was Scotland. On the one sunny day of the year, you can look south from Islay and see Ballycastle, Northern Ireland, 35 miles away. We are that close and just far enough away, if you know what I mean. But so they landed on Islay, taught us how to make the whiskey. We took the next 800 years to perfect it, and the earliest record, 1494, with Friar John Core. 1505, the Guild of Surgeon Barbers in Edinburgh were granted monopoly to produce and sell Uisgeveha as a tonic. So that's when it went from the religious to the commercial. And 1642, because of the English Civil War, the Scottish Parliament levied taxes on all the whiskeymen. And this drove them mad. And it drove them out up into the Highlands and out to the islands. And that's why we have such a high concentration of distilleries in the Highlands and on the island of Islay today, with 9 distilleries, because you can see the taxman coming from miles away on his wee rowboat to come to collect the taxes. So you'd hide those extra stills where you're making a few extra pennies on the side. By the late 18th century, there were over 14,000 illegal distills all over Scotland. Now, keep in mind, Scotland is smaller than the state of Kentucky. Now, today, Kentucky's got about 50 distilleries and growing. We have over 130 single malt distilleries in Scotland and growing. So score one for Scotland on that. But because there were so many illegal stills all over Scotland, the English government decided that they wanted to cash in on all this commerce. So they legalized whiskey production, and that was the Excise Act of 1823. And so that's when the stills came down from the hills and it became more of an industrialized production. Even though these are still small production facilities, these are basically old farms on an island off the coast of Scotland. And here you see Scotland, as I was mentioning, small in the state of Kentucky. The lowlands of Scotland, known as the Garden of Scotland, the whiskies from these regions are very light in style. Whiskies like Auchentoshan, grain, grassy notes. There's a lot of chalk in the water, so they're very dry whiskies. Don't have a long finish to them. You don't need a long finish because it's not as, the weather is quite a bit milder compared to when you get up north and off to the west coast. Then you move north of what's called the Highland Line. The land changes, the topography changes. You get more highs and lows in the whiskies as well. And the Highland style is more floral honey notes. And that comes from the heather, which grows predominantly in the Highland regions. Within the Highlands, you got a smaller subregion known as the Speyside. This is the heart of whiskey making. This is the whiskeys from these regions are much more herbal in their style. And you've got about 45 of the 130 distilleries are located within this region. And then finally, you've got the islands up north of this map. And the Orkneys, that's where you got the like of Highland Park and Scapa, and off to the northwest on the Isle of Skye, Talisker. But what we're here today is to taste from the little blue island off to the southwest corner on the left there, the island of Islay, and the distillery Bowmore, the oldest licensed warehouse of Scotch in the world. And you can see how close it is to Northern Ireland. And it's actually closer to Ireland than it is to Scotland itself. But this island is stuck out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Storms come racing across from Canada, and landfall for many of the storms are along the southern coast of Islay. And so that's why these whiskies that come from this island are big, bold, robust. Some say smoky, peaty. Well, we're going to get into that when we're tasting the whiskeys shortly. So here you see the island of Islay. It's only about 25 by 20 miles across, not very large. Here are the 9 distilleries. To the south, you've got the likes of Laphroaig and Lagavulin and Ardbeg. Up to the northeast, Bunnahabhain, Ardnahoe and Killila. Off to the west, you've got Kilcoman and Bruichladdich. And right in the center there is not only the distillery of Bowmore, but also the village of Bowmore. It is the oldest licensed village. It was established in the mid-1700s by the Campbell family, and it is located on what's called Loch Indal. Loch is a lake. In this case, it's a sea loch, and you can see why it was a perfect location to start a village, because it was on a protected harbor, and it was a perfect place for us to start our distillery. It actually moved in the late 1700s from Bridgend to Bowmore. David Simpson was the distillery owner, manager. And another point, Loch Grunyert, we'll be talking about oysters a little bit later. Loch Grunyert is where the oyster farm is located on the island of Islay. And here is Bowmore on the one sunny day of the year. Lovely, nice, calm day, but on Loch Indal, where you see Bowmore, where it says Bowmore there, that is the #1 vaults. That is, and so it is located right at sea level. And when we go into the warehouse and into the vaults, we will literally go below sea level. And that is going to influence the way the whiskeys are aging in this location. Now, there have been people on the island for since 4500 BC, the Mesolithic age. There were hunter-gatherers on the island. In the Neolithic, the first immigrant farmers landed on Isla. There are standing stones on Isla. They found fragments in middens from the Bronze Age, 2500 BC, from archaeological digs. The Christian period began in 500 AD. That's when St. Columba, on his way to Iona, stopped off on Isla. You see one of the finest examples of the Celtic crosses. It's called the Godalton Cross on the island of Isla itself. By the 800s, that was when the Vikings then established homes on the island and ran Isla for about 400 years until we got tired of them. And Somerled, the King of Scotland, drove them off the island. He was the Lord of the Isles, and this lake castle, this Lake Island castle, is where he was based. And then by 1500 AD, it was Sir John Campbell of Cawdor who then owned the island itself. But Bowmore, established 1779, a very important time for us because this was when David Simpson established his distillery, and basically he was going to be starting off with a still that looked something like this. It was very small because it was made easy to move, easy to hide because it was illegal at that time. But then he was enticed to come to the village of Bowmore, where at the village you'll find a circular church, which was established in 1767 for the study of piety and the culture of truth and honor. That is the plaque that you'll see when you come to this church. It's circular, so there's no corners for the devil to hide in. So legend has it that the locals drove the devil out of the church. He bolted down the street, down to the harbor where the Bowmore distillery was located, and he jumped into a barrel for the study of irreverence through spiritual enlightenment. After David Simpson, it was the Mudders from the two Glaswegian brothers who took over the distillery in 1837. They also established steamships travel in the 1850s between Isla and the mainland. It sped up the commerce, the speed of travel, because today it's a 2.5-hour ferry ride from the mainland to Isla. But back then it would take you the whole day if you were sailing and the currents and the winds were in your favor. But they really made many improvements. They improved the water source for Bowmore. They established a lade, a stream that came from a loch that in 2.5 air miles, as the crow flies, this lade meanders for 9 miles. But it was hand built by the Mutter family. And then it was in the 1880s, this was still a handcrafted, as it is today, established distillery. And the quality and the traditions had been passed on from family to family. So let us take you there. It's time for our first whiskey of the evening. And the best way to bring you there, since Bowmore is made on the island of Isla, the best way to take you there is the whole maritime experience. You've got the Great Bay and the Little Bay in New Hampshire, and along the eastern seaboard there, oysters are incredibly popular. So a great way to enjoy Bowmore is with seafood. And as I mentioned, there's great seafood on the island of Isla with the oysters, and there's lobster and scallops. What I've got for us today, are these some oysters, some Crown Prince. These are tinned oysters, but a great way if you can't get them fresh, but you guys can get them fresh up there in the Northeast. We're going to have a taste of the whiskey first. And this is the Bowmore 12-year. This is aged in a combination of bourbon and sherry casks. It's 90% bourbon casks and 12% and 10% sherry casks. And what I mean by that is for a minimum of 12 years, we've been aging these whiskeys in these two different types of casks. And for every 9 barrels of bourbon casked Bulmore, we're going to add in 1 cask of Oloroso sherry cask Bulmore. So have a nose of that. Now, as you're nosing, couple of tips: get your nose into the glass, part your lips. I'll demonstrate like this. For the other side of the zoomosphere. Because when you nose it with your mouth closed, you're getting full alcohol. It numbs the senses, anesthetizes your nose, and makes your head kick back. Now, you might like that experience, but for the sake of getting more of the layers of the spirit, breathe into your nose with your mouth open. And switch nostrils. Not with your neighbor, just from left to right, but because one does tend to be more intense, more sensitive than the other. And really the best time for nosing your whiskey is about 9 o'clock in the morning. By this time of the day, your palate is fairly worn. So, Simon says, nose and taste in the morning. Do it responsibly though, as all of these whiskeys, as we taste through this evening, please drink responsibly. I know most of you are probably doing it in the safety of your own home, but if you are driving and you've been consuming, please make sure you have a designated driver. We want to see you for the rest of these 90 days, right? And beyond. So bourbon casks giving you vanilla caramel notes. The sherry casks are giving you more fruit notes. And we're going to have a taste, and then we're going to taste it with the oysters. So here's the first toast of the evening. It goes something like this. May the best you've ever seen be the worst you'll ever see. May a mouse never leave your pantry with a teardrop in his eye. May you all be hale and hearty till you're old enough to die. I wish you all the best as I wish you all to be. Slanja. Now here comes the second tip. Place the glass more towards the middle of your tongue, because when you sip at the front, you get the sweet, which is fine, but you're also getting the heat. The alcohol sensors in the front part of your mouth. So middle of the tongue. Oh, spectacular. Now, for many of you, this is probably the first whiskey of the day. Congratulations. Welcome to Islay. Welcome to Bowmore. A lot of people think that these are big, smoky, getting hit over the head by a flaming log kind of experiences. Bowmore is a beautifully balanced whiskey. And there's some honey notes to this. There's a little bit of lemon zest, the vanilla notes from the bourbon barrels, a little bit of touch of the fruit notes. And so this is the way to enjoy your whiskey. You can enjoy it neat, or if you like, add a couple of drops of water to it. Water, like dew on a rose, opens up the bouquet. You drink the whiskey the way you like it. Don't have anybody tell you how to drink your whiskey. When we're sampling barrels in the warehouse at cask strength, we're nosing the casks. If we're going to actually taste, we'll add water and bring it down to 20% alcohol. 20%, that's a lot of water. But you open it up and it really does. You find the depth of the flavors. You find all these other flavors that are deep within that whiskey. Now, if you've got seafood as well, the other way to enjoy this is with seafood. So we have what's called the Oyster Luge, where what you'll do is you sip a little bit of the oyster brine, you sip a little bit of the whiskey, you eat the oyster, and then you take the whiskey, pour it into the oyster cup, the oyster shell, and luge on. Now, I don't have an oyster shell with me, but I'll demonstrate. So sip from the oyster cup, sip the whiskey, eat the oyster, and now into the oyster cup. Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. It brings out more of the salt, the sea, the maritime flavor. The whiskey is going to bring it out a little bit more of the creaminess in the oysters. And of course, you always want to be supporting your local oyster farms. They are, even in these challenging times, they are working to bring fresh oysters to your table every day. And please support locally. So that's the Bowmore 12-year. Lemon, honey notes, some dark chocolate flavors. Another way of enjoying this is you pour a little bit of this Bowmore 12 over vanilla ice cream. Fantastic. That, and a little bit of peat smoke. Not a lot, but peat is the fuel that we use to dry the barley, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. And a little bit of a mellow finish. But Oyster Luge is the way to go, or neat, on the rocks, splash of water. You drink it the way you like it. That's the most important thing we want you to take it away. It is about the balance. And for us, in the 19th century, you can see the boys here are filling casks. These are going to be Oloroso sherry casks. Sherry was the drink of fashion in the 19th century. And so sherry casks were coming up from Spain. And then we would empty the cask, and here's a perfect container for us to transport our whiskey to market. And so it really wasn't until the 20th century that aging became fashionable for these whiskeys, because they weren't sitting around 12 years back then. They were bottling it right from the barrel, or they were marrying different barrels to create new flavors. Okay, I think it's time. Sean, I think it's time for some trivia.
Excellent.
So we're going to ask a few trivia questions. So question number one.
Well, Simon, before we do that, I'll show them what you're giving away here.
Yes.
So we have a Bowmore Oyster platter, which you'll be able to use. So you have one as well. And then also along with that, we have a set of the glasses. So the Bowmore glasses. And we actually do have a person on Zoom, Simon, that asked. Jill wants to know, what type of glasses were you tasting your whiskey out of, your Scotch?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can use a rocks glass. You can use a Glencairn glass, which is the ones that the Glencairn are look like they're tulip shaped. Also, they kind of look like the shape of our stills. And what they do is they concentrate the nose. You can use a wine glass. I prefer a little bit more, and some of the glasses even come with a fancy wee hat to them. But that's if you're leaving your whiskey around, because whiskey will open up with its reaction to air. And some of them also have the glasses that have the tulip shape top to them. And what that's doing is depositing the spirit in the middle of the tongue rather than the front. So really, it's a matter of personal preference for you in terms of the glassware. Find one that works for you. And in terms of ice, my take on ice is that ice was made for bourbon, and bourbon was made for ice. In Scotland, it's cold and damp and rainy. We want to warm ourselves up. So that's why we're not adding ice in Scotland. But here in America, I think ice is king. If you're adding ice to the whiskey, I prefer to use the larger softball size, the large balls or squares, because that way you're getting less dilution. Because at a certain point, if you use smaller cubes, it melts much faster and it does dilute the whiskey. But all of these whiskeys take water differently, and they take water differently for everybody here.
Great. If you'd like to do a couple trivia questions, then we can select some winners here.
Okay. First question. What year was Bowmore licensed? What year was Bowmore licensed? And we're taking first correct answer, correct?
Amy will let us know the first correct answer, because we have people on Facebook as well as Zoom. And Amy says Jill was the first correct answer. So congratulations, Jill.
And that answer was 1779. Okay, I'm going to ask another one here. Ready? So, single malt Scotch is made from what type of grain? Single malt Scotch is made from what type of grain?
We have people answering very quick, so Amy is having to move fast. She's looking at the timestamps. She says John is our winner. So thank you, John.
John got the correct answer, which is barley.
Barley.
I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll dive into more whiskeys. What does Ushkebeha mean? What does Ushkebeha mean? apart from a really good time.
Our official winner of another oyster platter and glass set is Christopher.
Christopher, congratulations. And where are folks joining us from? Do we have any folks?
I have seen people mention they are from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, excellent.
Well as Warner, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So
excellent. Well, I have to say, of course, we've all been challenged with the current conditions, and I missed the New Hampshire Highland Games this year. I've been going for over 10 years and doing the tastings there. And it's one of my favorite events of the year. And we do it in conjunction with New Hampshire liquor and wine outlets. And we get a great response. And thank you to the outlets for supporting our efforts. And thank you to everybody coming to the Highland Games. We hope that we'll be able to do them again next year. Stay tuned. Because it's a great way of celebrating everything Scottish, but most importantly, it's a time for folks to gather and enjoy some really good whiskeys. Which takes us to our next tasting, Bowmore 15 year. So if you are following along with us with these whiskeys, if you take a look at these whiskeys here. This is the Bowmore 12. There we go. I'm holding up to the wrong camera. And this is the 15 year. You'll notice the color is quite a bit darker on this one. And that's because this is aged for 12 years in bourbon casks, and then an additional 3 years in Oloroso sherry casks. So remember, the Oloroso sherry casks were coming up from Spain, and they're going to impact the whiskey's aging in those types of casks much greater than bourbon casks. Bourbon casks will actually, you'll get more smoke from the peat used to dry the barley. Sherry casks, you get more the influence of the sherry itself. So that's going to cut down on a lot of the smoke. So this Bowmore 15 year is a beautiful, beautiful Bowmore. Until recently, this was called Bowmore 15 year darkest. We've taken that darkest name off the label. So you may see some bottles of that still floating around. It is the same liquid. It's just the darkest has been taken off the label. So 15 years. Now we're starting to see more fruit notes. The dark fruit notes, apricots and sultanas, raisins, the dried raisins from the influence of the sherry casks. And so this next toast is a toast to the Spanish and their sherry casks. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this whiskey. And it goes something like this. Saluda, dinero, amor, y el tiempo para conquistarla todo. I have no idea what I just said there. But hopefully, health, wealth, love, and if I said it right, time to conquer all. If I said it wrong, time to conquer the bull. Salud, toro.
And Simon, while you do that tasting, one of your earlier photos had the gentleman pouring into the sherry casks. And so the question that we have on Zoom from Mark is, what is the vessel that they are pouring out of into the sherry casks?
Oh, that was a marrying tank. So what they'll do is they will, as they're producing, it's what's called the receiving tank. So at the end of the distillation production section, they have a receiving tank where all the spirit has been being held. And then in the filling station is what you saw there with the two gentlemen. That's new spirit that is being, because that's an older photo. That would have been new spirit that's going directly into the barrels for aging. Today, they'll disgorge those smaller barrels that you saw them filling. They'll marry them into a larger marrying tank to let the whiskey marry. So for example, the Bowmore 15 year, when we say 15 years, so we've got the whiskey aged for 12 years plus the additional 3 years in the sherry casks. And then we're going to take a percentage of all of those casks, put them into a marrying tank, And then from there, we'll let them marry anywhere from 2 to 4 months. And from that, then that will then go to bottling.
Thank you.
Yep. So now we're getting, and this is a beautiful whiskey to pair with dark chocolate. This is this is a little bit more of an after dinner drink. Goes great with cigars, and just a delicious. For me, this is there's a real sweet spot for this, and you start to notice these fruit notes really becoming much more prominent at 15 years. So they will continue to develop. This is the sheriff that took over the Bowmore distillery in 1925. You've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16 lads here who are making the whiskey. This is not much different from the number of people who are making whiskey at Bowmore today. Total operational staff at Bowmore is 20 people. Each man and woman they know every step of the process. Some other distilleries will separate mashing and distilling with malting, where they grow the barley, and the warehousemen. But the group at Bowmore, they learn everything and they do everything at the distillery. So historically, now there's an old photo from the early 1900s from the Bowmore distillery on Loch Indal. And it is that time now we move into 18 years in the barrels that they've been sitting in the #1 vaults below sea level. And as I mentioned earlier, the influence of temperature and as well as barometric pressure. I mean, you look at some of the micro distilleries today that are in the likes of, say, like Stranahan's up in Denver, Colorado, up in at a mile high, at that higher altitude. And we've got higher altitude distilleries in Scotland as well. The Ardmore is a great example, up in the mountains, up in the Highlands, and Dalwhinnie is another example. At a higher altitude, you're getting a different pressure, and that's going to create different conditions as these whiskeys are aging. It's going to be drier. But in the cool, damp climate of Islay and below sea level, it's almost like you're walking into a mausoleum. Time stops in these warehouses. And because of that, it creates these really beautiful secondary and tertiary notes that you can't find anywhere else. And we're not doing anything with the barrels. It's just that location and the conditions in the warehouse, in what we call a dunnage warehouse. It's an earthen floor. The casks are stacked 3 high, and we're just maintaining, making sure there's no leaks, and just leave them for what we call the long sleep. So let us have a taste of the 18 year. Now, 18 years in the barrel, we lose 2% evaporation every year. We call that the angel's share. The happiest angels in the world are over the Bowmore distillery. Now, in Kentucky, they're losing 3 to 4%. We're stingy Scots. We're not going to give that up. But no, actually, it's because it's the cooler, damper climate. So plus, when the barrels come over, they're used casks. So they've already got some moisture in them from the what was in the casks before, whether it was sherry or whether it was bourbon casks. And that's why there's a higher evaporation rate in Kentucky, because they use brand new barrels. So now the name of the island is Islay. It's a Gaelic word. It means the island of Ireland. Very simple, folk. They don't beat around the bush. But it's a great way to remember the region, because a lot of folks will say to me, Simon, is it Islay? Is it Ela? Just remember, Islay means island, and you got the pronunciation of the region. Or Islay have another Bowmore. So here's the toast. I must go down to the sea today, to the lonely sea in the sky, and all I ask is an Islay cask, and the friends to drink it dry. Slàinte, cheers. Mm. Giving it some time, folks. And that's one of the things I encourage you to do as well. Um, when you get into the middle of the tongue there, hold it there, give it a swirl, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Taken 18 years to make this, we ask that you take more than 18 seconds to enjoy it. And during that time, you're reacquainting with the old, you're making new friends. It's about the spirit within the spirit. And this is really beautifully, the fruit notes on this, there's some toffee notes, a much longer finish. If you think about when you're standing on the dock on Loch-in-Dal and it's a force 10 storm in your face, that's going to be the younger whiskies, like we've got some 10-year, some 12-year, and there's white caps on the sea. That 18 years, the white caps have gone away. It's a calm day on the bay. The sun could be shining. If it is, good luck. Congratulations. And it's just a much calmer. And so the flavors will lap at the shore the way that you're enjoying your whiskey, just coming at you slower, and you're able to separate those flavors. And that's why perhaps you may have cask strength whiskeys. I always recommend that you try them neat first. And then if they're too big for you, add a couple of drops of water. That calms the seas, and it gives you, it allows you to enjoy more of the flavors. Think of after a summer's rain, it just that moisture in the air allows more of the flavors, the more of the aromas to be intense in the air itself. Okay, so that's 18-year. Sean, do we have any questions, any comments? How are we doing?
We do have a few questions here. So one of the questions is fairly easy. How many casks do you tend to have in storage at one time, Simon?
Yeah, we've got about 50,000 casks.
Okay. And another question is, when you're taking, do you take a small breath of air when you have whiskey in your mouth already? Winemakers expect that.
Yeah, I mean, and my good friends, we're with Beam Suntory, Bulmore, and my good friends like Freddie No at Jim Beam, he does what you call the Kentucky Chew, and I'll demonstrate. It goes like this. And that's doing the same thing. It's pulling air into your mouth as you're. It's also good as a turkey call, I gather, because they love the whiskey. When they smell that whiskey, they come and running. But yes, adding a little bit of air to it is going to open it up as well, and you get that full mouth feel on it.
Great. Those are the questions we have for now. Would you like to do a couple more trivia questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. This is a two-part question. What types of casks are used for Bowmore 12-year?
Okay, well, Amy finds us the winner on that. It's always interesting to see how the aging process changes how you may actually enjoy the spirit as well, right? So starting with the oysters and then moving to the more chocolate after dinner style. It's always interesting to see how it changes that way.
Yeah, and pairing food and whiskey is a great way of exploring all of the flavors, because a lot of folks think, well, no, it's just whiskey is, and when I say whiskey, I mean single malt Scotch. Whiskey is only for after dinner. No, you can barbecue. And particularly these whiskeys from Islay, that smoky quality pair beautifully, and as well they pair, because they're made on an island, they pair with seafood, scallops, lobster. Yeah, you want, and depending on the type of peat that we use, the peat on the island of Islay is decomposed vegetation, which includes seaweed. The peat in the Highlands of Scotland is more decomposed pine trees. So the Highland whiskies, it's more that peat infusion is more of a forest campfire. The peat infusion on Islay is more of a beach bonfire. So just kind of think about the difference between those flavors.
Yeah, we definitely talk more about pairings oftentimes on wine than we do spirits. So our winner was Steve. And just as a side note, we had many people guessing sherry, but they forgot the second part of the answer being bourbon.
That's correct. Bourbon and sherry. Good one for you, Steve. Congratulations. So another question. What is the Gaelic name of the island where Bowmore is made, and what does it mean? Another two-parter. What is the Gaelic name of the island where Bowmore is made, and what does it mean?
I'm glad I have my trusty Amy with us tonight because these people are answering way too fast.
Well,
We've
that's
had a few
good.
answers saying that it's the Big Rock, but we know that's not correct.
No, the name of the island, not the distillery, the name of the island.
So David has given us the answer, both the answers correct. So David is your man.
Congratulations, David. You've got some Bowmore glasses and a lovely oyster tray coming to you. All right. I'm going to move on here. Oh, there. We're talking about the rough seas by Bowmore. There's a rough day there, and it is located right on the sea. And the loch itself is Loch Indal, Indaal. Indal means in delay. So when the storms were raging out in the open sea, the ships would come into Loch Indal and anchor until the storms pass, and then they would head back out to sea again. So that's why it was a perfect location for us to start the village and the Bowmore distillery. So here we covered this already, but that's that angel share, and this is a combination. This is showing you the different types of casks. The smaller bourbon barrels, those are 200-liter bourbon barrels, and then you've got, which is where it says 1957, that's a bourbon barrel. To the left of that would be a hogshead, which is a 250-liter cask. And on the ground level, the ground floor there, those are going to be Oloroso sherry casks. Because of our relationship with Suntory, we are Beam Suntory. When you come to visit Bowmore, you may also see some Japanese casks, Mizunara oak. Mizunara is a very thick oak. It comes from the rainforests of Japan, and it takes much longer to age the whiskeys in the Mizunara oak. Some say it takes a good 10 years before it starts really maturing properly in the Mizunara oak. Now, the bourbon barrels, great for us. The reason being, American white oak grows very tall, very straight. There are stands of it in Missouri and in the Midwest. And because it grows very thick and tall with a very high canopy, there's very few knots in the wood. And that's really important when it comes to barrel making. You want good, strong, straight planks with no knots in it, because it's when you get knots, that's when you get leakage in the casks. So that's one of the reasons we don't use Scottish oak, because in Scotland, there's no sun. So the tree kind of grows like this, trying to find sun because there is none. And so because of that, there's lots of knots in the wood and it leads to a lot of leakage. So that's why you don't see a lot of Scottish oak in the warehouses in Scotland. Right, we've got one more whiskey for us to talk about, to taste, and this is the Bowmore 25 year. 25 years is a combination of bourbon and sherry cask. I forgot to mention with the 18 year is a combination of bourbon and sherry casks. The majority of it is sherry casks. And that's what we've got with this one as well. This is majority of it is 25 years in sherry. So lots of fruit notes on this one. Now as we start getting into the 20s, these dark fruit notes start evolving and blossoming into tropical fruit notes. Mango, papaya, pineapple. Now, again, we're not doing anything with these casks, but these flavors start to percolate in this marriage between the wood and the whiskey. And it really is a thing of beauty. So if you're lucky enough to have a glass of 25 year, please raise it now. Have a nose of that one there. So much tropical fruit a little bit of lime, mango, but the pineapple is one of the big keynotes. All right, so here's our last toast of the evening, at least on Zoom, and it goes something like this. And I stole this from my good pal Freddie No, our from Jim Beam. It goes like this: May there be no hell, and if there is, I'll see you at the bar. Cheers. Slanja.
So we're lucky enough. Mark was able to acquire about 100 bottles of New Hampshire of the 25-year Bowmore. So it is a special drink, and it's a very nice gift for somebody at these holidays. As is the 18-year as well. We have 100 of those bottles roughly in stores throughout New Hampshire as well. So those are great gifts if we're talking about that for the season. So
excellent. And with this 25-year, there's a little bit of leather and pipe tobacco notes on this. There's also the mustiness of the warehouses starts to come out. This is a very contemplative whiskey, just a beautiful and a great whiskey to share with friends as a gift for friends. This really is a very special whiskey, and it really speaks to the traditions and the craft of the whiskey men and women who have been making this whiskey since 1779. I think it's time for a couple more questions here.
Sure.
Okay. How many distilleries are currently in operation on Islay? How many distilleries are currently in operation on Islay?
I'm so impressed with how fast people are responding to these questions.
Well, I think they've been taking notes.
So our winner is Tracy. And if I'm right, Tracy has joined us for nearly every day of 90 days. So Tracy has got to have a very stocked bar at this point. So I'm proud of her tasting skills. So Tracy, congratulations.
Congratulations, Tracy.
It was not.
Okay. Here we go. Another question. What are the three main regions of whiskey production in Scotland? What are the three main whiskey producing regions of Scotland?
We have a little bit of a challenge here. We have Islay, Speyside. So we're having a little bit of challenge getting this answer. It's a little simpler than everybody thinks. So Joshua got it correct. And the correct answer is, Simon?
Highlands, Islands, and Lowlands. And yes, Speyside it's actually technically a sub-region within the Highlands. Historically, it was Lowlands, Highlands, and Islands. The first licensed distillery in Scotland in 1823 was this tiny little distillery called Glenlivet. Heard of it? And so because of that, many other distilleries popped up in the valley of the River Livet, Glenlivet, many of them calling themselves Glenlivet. And that's why it's known as the Glenlivet, to distinguish itself from all the others that were trying to cash in on that name. But the Spey River Valley, the Spey is one of the fastest, purest rivers in Scotland. And so many distilleries established themselves along the River Spey for the water, as well as for the transportation to be able to move whiskey from the distilleries along the waterways. So technically it's Lowlands, Highlands, and Islands. You were not wrong if you said Speyside, but that's not what we were looking for in terms of the question, the answer.
So absolute beautiful country. I've been able to visit a couple times and hit a couple isles, Isle of Man and the Isle of Skye, and it's always amazing to see the fog roll into some of those locks as you talked about. It's amazing space. So,
well, and when you look at the distilleries, the white wash of the Bowmore distillery, they're painted that way because, as you were saying, Sean, with the fog sets in very, very thick and quite often. And the whitewash of the distillery served as a beacon for the ships, for them to be able to come in as they were bringing in grain and bringing out whiskey. So that's why the distilleries on the coast are painted white the way they are.
So we do have a couple more questions for you.
Yes.
Simple one is, Charles would like to know, are the sherry casks mostly European oak or American oak?
Sherry casks are mostly European oak.
Okay. And one other question from David on Zoom. He's asking at what levels of peat over ages. Does it get less or more as it ages?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people think the longer it spends in the barrel, the peatier it's going to be. It's exactly the opposite. The longer in the barrel, you're going to get more of the influence of the wood, less of the smoke. And if you look at a graph, there are certain key peaks of flavor, and in terms of the marriage of peat, smoke, and wood and spirit. And that will vary depending on individual taste. Some people like the smokier whiskeys, so they may prefer the younger aged whiskeys. Others might like the older because they like a little bit less of the smoke and a little bit more of the wood. For some folks, and we have some very old whiskeys. For some people, the older whiskeys can be too woody, too much wood. You're looking for a nice balance between what's come off the still and how it spends its time in the barrels. And for each person, that's a very individual experience.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you talk to somebody who's tasting spirits too. It's that they sometimes discount trying the same brand, right? The same producer, just because of an age that they didn't like. So if they didn't like the 15, they don't try the 12 or the 18, and they really should. They should try the whole thing. We do have one other interesting question from Jill on Zoom. She's curious about the competition in Scotland. Is it healthy competition among the distilleries? Do they share information? How does it? What's the community like of distillers?
Well, you said it right there. It's a community. It's a very strong community, particularly on the islands. On Isla with 9 distilleries, there are months during the winter when the island is isolated because of the storms, and the ferries are shut down, and the flights, the plane, and you can fly to Isla. It's a 20-minute flight from Glasgow if the plane can land, just warning you. But the community, when the island's shut down, if the boys are making whiskey and something goes wrong and they need a part, they're going to go down the road to Bunnahabhain or over to Lafroig and to see if they've got an extra part to help them out. It is a very tight-knit community of whiskey men and whiskey women, and they help each other out. On the global side, the corporate side, it's a little bit more competitive, but certainly, and on Isla, there are some local rivalries. Bowmore, the village of Bowmore, has a big rivalry with Port Ellen, which is the southern part of the island, which is where Lafroig and Lagavulin and Ardbeg are located. So there's always the football matches get pretty intense between Bowmore and Port Ellen. Let me just say that. But ultimately, we are here to support each other.
Nice. And we have another question. I don't know if this is giving away trade secrets, but somebody is actually asking what our parts per million, our ppm is. So probably the Marley.
Yeah, that would be parts per million for us at Bulmore range around 22 parts per million, which is definitely higher than if you've ever had some Highland peated like Ardmore, which is at 15 parts per million. We also have, to give you another example, Connemara, the Irish whiskey peated, that's at about 15 parts per million. But Bulmore is at 22 versus Lafroig, which is at 39 to 41 parts per million. So the smoke is there, but the way by using the sherry casks, it's going to cut the smoke, but also the way we dry the barley over a hot fire versus a hot peat fire versus Lafroig uses what we call a cold smoke peat. And that's absorbed into the smoke, into the barley differently from the way Bulmore dries the barley. So I used the analogy of a beach bonfire earlier for the Isla whiskeys. Bulmore is the beach bonfire that night. You've got the heat and the smoke and the dryness. Lafroig is the beach bonfire the next morning. You wake up sprawled out on the beach. The fire's probably died with wisps of smoke and it's raining. You're wondering where the night has gone. But that's the difference between Bulmore and Lafroig.
Okay, great, thank you. And would you like to do a couple more questions?
Yes, let's do it. This is, we just talked about it, so maybe In what stage of production is peat used? In what stage of production is peat used? Is it fermentation? Is it distillation? Or is it malting?
Okay, I do see a couple answers coming in. I'll let people know that we won't be pulling repeats, so continue to participate, but we'll make sure that we share with everybody we can. So the winner for the answer, which is malting, is Mark.
Excellent, Mark. Congratulations. Yeah, that's, a lot of times we get questions about, well, what distinguishes Bowmore from all the other distilleries? And it is really a combination of factors. It is the pear-shaped stills that we use, the smaller stills. It is the heat of the peat fires. It is the location of the warehouses. All of these things are combining factors that create these beautiful liquids that we enjoy. All right, we got another question.
Yes.
What kind of stills are used to make single malt Scotch? What kind of stills are used to make single malt Scotch?
You mentioned earlier that you have a really small crew over there, Simon. How many stills do you have, actually?
We've got two pairs.
Very nice. So the winner, and I'll let Simon tell us the answer, is Karen.
Karen, and the answer is copper pot.
Correct.
Copper pot stills. Just think about these stills, and they're a little bit of kind of a genie in a bottle kind of look to them. It really brings the spiritual side to spirit making when you see these copper pot stills. But size and shape of the still will influence the flavor, and the copper itself is a beautiful reactive element. It draws a lot of unwanted impurities out. Some of them are actually quite dangerous. So that's why after a first distillation, some of those toxins still are there, so you have to distill them off. When we talk about blind drunk, those are those undesirables that we don't want in that final spirit. Think of it as a modified tea kettle. So it's got a rolling boil with that angled arm at the top there, and it'll wear away at the copper. And the copper itself is the thickness of a penny. They'll know after as it wears away. You can literally poke your finger through the copper, and we'll replace the sections of the stills because sections wear away faster than others. Oh, and that's how copper wire was invented. Was two Scotsmen fighting over a penny. All right, little Zoom comedy for you there.
Very good.
Okay. We're starting. Let's see here. Yeah, we've got a few questions left. Okay. Yes. What is the name given to the evaporation of whiskey during maturation? What is the name given to the evaporation of whiskey during maturation?
I have to laugh. I saw the answer come up before you even finished asking the question. So Ted Holland got the correct answer, which is Angel Share.
Angel Share. All right. I'm going to move along here. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going. All right, we're all going to sing now, all right? And Mark, you can sing along as well. So this is, you know the melody. Da, 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 right? Okay. But we've included some, we've made it a Bowmore song here. You ready? So grab your glass of whiskey, raise it to the sky, sing loud, sing proud. I'll give you the starting note. Bo. Okay, all right, we ready? Here we go. Bowmore's a whiskey sweet and strong, doo-da, doo-da. Pour me a glass and it won't last long. Oh, the doo-dah day. The distillery by the sea is the spirit best for me. I'll put my money on the best in town. All praise to the big, big B. To Bowmore! Slanja! Cheers! That was horrible, wasn't it?
I think it was great. I think they would like to have a Zoom entirely on learning the actual cheers and the toasts that you've been sharing.
Well, I would just, I'll come up to New Hampshire and we'll do some live tastings. I'd be happy to do that. Excellent. So we've got a couple more questions to ask.
Yep, and I'm gonna slide in also at this time and let people know that if you're following us on Scavify, the adventure for a passport around these 90 days, then your code word tonight that you need to get your additional points is Scotch whiskey. So that is your code word tonight, Scotch whiskey.
And Sean, how do you spell whiskey?
Well, you spell it correctly with the E.
Oh, no, that's not the correct
Oh,
spelling.
sorry. Giving bad notes here. So it's without the E.
It is with the E. See, when you spell it correctly, there's no E. It's with, because back in the day when you were when we were first selling it commercially, you had to pay by the letter. And as I mentioned earlier, we're stingy Scots, so we took the E out.
You know, the one thing that I thought was interesting in your presentation, Simon, was you said it took you 800 years to perfect it. Why so long?
Well, we're a simple folk, Sean.
I see. Okay.
But we got nothing else to do, so we're going to sit around and just, well, we'll tinker. Well,
there you go.
Right.
Always good to keep making it better, isn't it?
Always. Okay. This is a. Can we ask another question?
Absolutely. 2 more questions.
Okay. So here we're seeing the #1 vaults. What makes Bowmore's #1 vaults warehouse so special? This is a 2-part answer on this. What makes Bowmore's #1 vaults warehouse special?
We have a lot of answers here. And people who have already won are also still answering. You're doing a great job. So it looks like we have our winner. Amy is filling me in for sure. I can't announce it until I know for positive. It looks like the winner is Paul. And the
Congratulations, Paul. You got the right answer, which is #1. It's the oldest licensed Scotch warehouse in the world, and it is located below sea level.
That is correct.
All right, we've got one more question. This is name 2 flavors contributed by American bourbon barrels. 2 flavors contributed by American bourbon barrels.
Oh, I think you might have stumped people.
Oh, no, really?
Well, okay, they're answering. It took a little bit longer, so.
Good, we got to make them think.
We had fruit as an answer and oak and smoke as an answer. Well, oh, we do have a winner though. Here we go. The winner is McDonough.
McDonough, a good Celt.
There you go.
So McDonough wrote, and there were 3 possible answers that we were given on this one. Vanilla, and that's from the vanillins from the American white oak. The caramel, which is the caramelization of the wood sugars during the charring process. And the 3rd possible could be coconut. Those are the lactone notes that are released by American white oak. So
McDonough got the vanilla and the caramel, so he had those 2 on his brain.
Excellent, excellent. So we're finishing up my portion of the evening here.
Yes.
I want to thank Mark and all the good folks at New Hampshire liquor stores, Sean and your staff at We Do, and our Beam Suntory team for New England, Matt Bissett, and our distributor partners. Thank you so much for your support. It's been a challenging year, and I've really missed getting out to see all my good friends up in the Northeast. Please know that as soon as we are able, we'll be up there with a dram in hand. And as I finish off my portion, I'll send you off with this. My ship lies at anchor, I soon now must dock. I wish you safe journey without any shock. And if ever we should meet again by land or by sea, I will always remember your kindness to me. So here's a health to the company and one to my lass. Let's drink and be merry all out of one glass. Let's drink and be merry, all grief to refrain. For we may or might never all meet here again. Slanja.
Lonja. I'd love to know, Simon, if that's part of becoming a Scottish citizen, if you have to know all of these, and because it must be hard to remember them after a few tastings. That would be my challenge, I think.
No, actually, well, you just make up the verses then after that. You can become a great improviser.
There you go. Excellent. You might have a second career in rap, actually, if you try that then. So, well, thank you. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. It's been great hosting these events. We have 90 days of them, which is wonderful. Usually, obviously, in November, we get to have our distillers showcase where Mark gets to invite a couple hundred of his nearest friends like Simon to the state to entertain us with these wonderful cheers, as well as educate us and share their products with us. So thank you. It's so great. And I also do want to mention that we reviewed tonight the 12-year, 15, 18, and the 25. We also have a 26 on our floor. And the other thing is Simon is also tomorrow going to be enjoying becoming the 30-year-old Bowmore because he's having a birthday. So congratulations, Simon, and happy birthday. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. And I'll be here tomorrow night with Master Distiller John Campbell from Lefroy.
Yes,
So
correct.
the party continues.
Please join us again tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.